Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Cabinet of the 4th of September 2024. I'm Councillor Michael Jones, Leader of the Council and Chair of the Cabinet. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Once outside, please turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the multi-storey car park on Exchange Road. If you're unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you'll be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the council's YouTube channel. Please note that there is a no comments function available as part of this webcasting. The council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done so in accordance with the council's published data retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the chamber, they are consenting to their image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note of what is displayed on the screens in the room as it shows what is being recorded and webcast. Cameras are currently set to capture you in seated positions, so please remain seated when speaking. You can request to speak as usual in committees by raising your hand. To speak by pressing the button with the face on it, and the microphone will go green when you are live. We will now commence with apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies? We haven't? No? Okay. Disclosures of interest. Does any member have any disclosures of interest? No, I don't see anyone indicating. Now we come to the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of July. Does the Cabinet agree that the minutes are an accurate record of the meetings? Thank you. Public question time. I don't see anyone in the public gallery, so I don't propose to read out the rules relating to it. Thank you. Item 5 matters referred to the Cabinet and any report from the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. As normal, Councillor Ayling, I'll bring you in during each item. Item 6. We will start by considering the Housing Association Scrutiny Panel final report. Councillor Lunn is in attendance as the chair of the panel to present the report. This report went to OSC on the 23rd of July and the Commission's comments are included in the appendix at the end of the report. Councillor Lunn, welcome to you. Please feel free to present.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'll try and keep this as brief as possible, though it is a very wide-ranging topic. The OSC decided to set up a Housing Association Scrutiny Panel after numerous councillors, I think, had felt that sometimes the response we received as councillors from housing associations on issues relating to residents that had complained to us about them was perhaps not up to the same standard that we received from Crawley Homes. Amongst other things, the sort of standard of repairs, the standard of antisocial behaviour and responses to antisocial behaviour, and also just in general investment in the area. I was elected the chair of the panel, and we've then met 4 times. But I should say, although I was chair, it was very much a team effort. Also had councillors Ayling, Hellier, Pritchard, and Councillor Piggott, who was subsequently left the council, but all their work was essential in getting to this final report. So I thank them for that now, and indeed I also thank the officers, namely Heather Girling, in writing and supporting the panel throughout its existence. What we strove to do was try and get the housing associations that are most represented in Crawley, and I'll come to that in a minute, to come along to the panel so that we could ask them questions and try and get some feedback from them on some of our concerns. That proved difficult, and that led to our sixth recommendation, which is and will be a recurring theme of sort of my overview, that we asked the government, or rather we asked the Cabinet Member for Housing and or the Chief Executive to write to the government and ask for council to have greater power to scrutinise registered housing providers, mainly because in the end, despite efforts of the officers, repeated efforts of the officers to try and get housing associations to attend, only one attended in person and another one sent a written report. And we have, a substantial number of housing associations within Crawley. Some of them have very significant holdings of sort of over 500 houses, and it was disappointing that none of them really seemed that interested in our efforts to try and get them to turn up and just ask questions. And to be clear, we don't see housing associations as a problem within Crawley. They're a key partner in delivering the social housing mix that we have in Crawley, and will continue to be a key partner in delivering our social housing mix within Crawley. And we see them as partners, and we want to work with them. But when you are a partner, it'd be nice to come along and answer some questions if you do have questions about that partnership. So it was very, very disappointing that we had so little engagement from the housing associations. As I say, that's led to the recommendation 6, and I'll come on to just acknowledging the Cabinet's feedback on our report at the end of my summary, but I'll go through what the overall summary before that. Whilst they only Hyde attended, we still had some good engagement from Crawley Borough Council officers. We also had some responses from the police about antisocial behaviour. And the one housing association that did turn up was a very interesting discussion that we had with them and provided some good info on some of our other recommendations. So I'll just go through our other recommendations and a bit more background behind them. I'm just trying to get to it on the report. Oh, I've gone to the wrong place in the report, sorry. There we go. So recommendation 1 is another key point of the discussions that we had is that there's new legislation coming in for residents in social housing to be surveyed and for housing associations to publish that data so that people can see how they're doing. Now, what we don't know yet is how that data will be presented to us, whether that'll be broken down to Crawley specific. We would obviously like it to be Crawley specific, both so we can see if there are any housing associations that have particularly negative data, but also if there's housing associations that might be performing or have much higher satisfaction than Crawley Homes. It'd also be interesting for us to find out what they're doing that we're not doing in Crawley Homes and try and learn from them. I don't think anybody thinks that Crawley Homes are while they're a very good service provider, they're not, they don't know everything and are perfect at everything. So I'm sure there's lessons that we can be learned from that. So when this legislation comes in and the answers of these resident surveys come out, we do want to sort of try and get that data provided to us so we can see, both as councillors and as officers, if we can learn from it. And then when that data comes out, we've asked that the OSC receives a report to compare those two things, so we can just sort of keep an eye on it. We then moved on to sort of some things that we could do with antisocial behaviour specifically, but also just sort of learning best practice amongst registered social housing providers and other partner agencies where they all get involved. And this is particularly stemming from the experience of one councillor in Three Bridges, who had managed to get a sort of a working group together of relevant agencies so that when antisocial behaviour that was very disruptive was occurring, it could actually be dealt with by the right people working together in the right way. And it was just trying to draw some lessons from that and sort of set up working groups at the relevant level where there is disruptive behaviour to try and make sure lessons are learned and best practice shared, and we can also deal with the antisocial behaviour as necessary. We also learned from the Guinness Partnership that they do some ward inspections, and we as local councillors hadn't been invited to those, so we asked them to make sure we were included in those, and we also passed on that wish to other registered providers as required. That's recommendation D. Recommendation E stemmed from the housing associations saying that sometimes they felt, we don't know if this was specific to Crawley, of course, I'd like to think it wasn't, but it could have been, but it might not be, that sometimes they got sort of tenants assigned to them who probably had a mix of challenging behaviours known to the placing authority that wasn't passed on to the housing association. So they then had a very disruptive placement, whereas, and if that was already in a challenging area where there's already antisocial behaviour going on, that could lead to a real sort of difficulty. And so they just said, if there is known previous history of tenants, and obviously in accordance with GDPR, that information can be provided to them, it can help lead to sort of a better integration into that neighbourhood wherever they are placed when they get that. So that was our other request. That was recommendation E. So those and recommendation F I've already led on. Again, we really wanted more, the overriding feeling was we really wanted more engagement from the social housing providers, and we wish they'd turned up a bit more. So those were all our recommendations. It went through the Scrutiny OSC, and had a long and detailed discussion, and I think all those were agreed with some comments. And then also, I note, and just moving on, that you've already sort of published your thoughts on it, and I'm very happy about your thoughts. I should say that it's sort of really strengthening what we felt and actually taking it maybe a step further. We were maybe too timid in our efforts to try and get change. So I'm very glad of the response and look forward to it being, seeing if we can get some output from your response. So thank you for that. And again, just thank you to everybody who's been involved, who's attended, whether that be officers, partners, or housing associations or councillors. It was a really enjoyable experience, and we've all learned a lot more about housing associations, but we just felt we could have learnt even more if there'd been a bit more engagement from the other housing associations other than the one that did turn up. So that's it, unless there's any questions for me, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lunnon. I'll now open the debate or questions for other Cabinet members. I see Sue Mullins.
Hi. First of all, I really welcome the report, and I think it was very timely because we've talked about this a lot, particularly to do with ASB and so on, and it's something that is worrying. And it's important because we refer our residents from our waiting list to the housing associations, so it's important that we keep contact, that we know what's actually happening after they've moved on from us. I do apologise if it's buried somewhere in the paperwork, which I haven't seen, but I think what would have been quite useful to us is to have a list of the providers that we have in Crawley, which I'm sure is somewhere in your extra papers at the back there. Would be quite interesting for other councillors to find out who the providers are in Crawley and the number of units they each have that they're using on our behalf, quite honestly. I did wonder if it would be possible in the future, because we all get complaints all the time, and we do get complaints a lot from the Housing Association. Is there some way we can put those together in some sort of a file so that we can get an idea of how many complaints are actually coming in, rather than just hearsay that one councillor says I've heard this or another councillor says I've heard that? Might be a good idea to be able to keep some kind of record of that. I also would be interested in how many of our residents are actually referred to housing associations each year from our waiting lists, because I think that would be quite a useful thing for us to know as well. And then also some way of assessing how the larger providers, such as Guinness, maintain and look after their areas, because I can remember being quite shocked walking around Broadfield one day and seeing the condition of the pathways and the grass and the lawns and the flower beds, and thinking this is not up to standard. We know that Crawley Borough Council always doesn't get it perfect, but as far as I can see, they do a really good job, and I would like to see those areas of the town look as good as our other areas do. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. Councillor Chris Mullins, and then Councillor.
Just to follow on with
Microphone, Chris.
Oh, sorry. That one. Yeah, just to follow on from Sue, because we did discuss this today at home. It's one of those interesting things you do when you're married. It's better than having an argument. But we came to the conclusion that, to a large extent, these housing associations are a bit of a mystery to most councillors. We have our residents who live there and who sometimes make complaints to us, but we feel a bit powerless to do anything about those things, because first of all, we don't have contact numbers for whichever trust it is, and we're completely out of touch, and we have, I suppose, no authority there either. And I would like to see some of that changing. I would like to see us moving on to building better links with these organisations, because they're not going to go away. They house an awful lot of Crawley residents. A lot of them have come off of our housing list, as Sue indicated, and therefore they're very much Crawley people that have ended up with the social landlords. So I think that whilst the report itself I think is very good and covers an awful lot of aspects, but what I would have liked to have seen attached to it was a whole list of what social landlords or organisations that we have in Crawley, so that we can start to understand the differences between renting from a council and renting in the private market, and get some of those figures into our heads, and maybe even with the Guinness Trust, the Hydes and people like that, if we had some contact numbers with them, where we, you know, if we have tenants with serious concerns about the condition of their property and they can't get anywhere, even a friendly phone call might help from a councillor to those people. We might be able to say, look, you know, I'm a local councillor for this area. Is there any way of sorting this out? It might go nowhere, it might go somewhere, but it'd be worth a try and to see. I mean, I like to think that all of these properties would be up to the decent home standards. I suspect many of them are not, because the financial resources are not always put in to them that should be. Whereas I think I find our staff in Crawley Homes very much more committed to that decent home standard, and I'm proud to be able to say that. So that's really what our thoughts are, and we were kicking this around a bit, as I said, at home, and these are our conclusions from the Mullins claim.
Thank you, Chris. I've got Ian next on my list, but what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, is give you the last word on this before we move to recommendation. Is Councillor Rana indicated she wanted to say something? So, Tahira, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask about antisocial behaviour. Say, like a tenant, their next door neighbour are playing loud music during the day. What help is available for them? Or, the children next door are making too much noise. I know I had a question from somebody in Langley Green. What help do they get, and who do they get help from? Thank you.
Thanks, Tahira. It's not strictly on the on the subject of housing associations as such, although there was an element about ASB. Amanda, would you like to give a brief reply on that? And Tahira, I'd suggest as well, if there is anything you need to pursue, then I'm sure Amanda and the officers, Laura Paget and the team, will be happy to pick that up with you offline.
Thank you. So for a noise complaint, there are a number of remedies. If they are a tenant, they should approach their own landlord first. They should start recording incidents, creating an incident sheet. And the expectation would be that if there was robust enough evidence, that the landlord would be taking action under the tenancy agreement. If they're a Crawley Homes tenant, of course, it would be our ASB team that would be involved. If they're a housing association tenant, we can still get involved, but in the first instance, we would ask them to talk to their own landlord. If they weren't getting what they wanted from their own landlord and they met the conditions, they can ask for an antisocial behaviour case review, which is a multi-agency case review, but there are specific conditions to meet with that regard. If it is noise nuisance, then it can also be looked under with regards to the conditions around statutory noise nuisance as well. But again, it's depending on when the thresholds are met. So if you want to give me the details, I'll explore it with our ASB team, whether it's our tenant or another tenant. I can give you some tenant with another provider, I can give you some advice.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Tahira. Councillor Irvine.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I just suggest that if anyone scrolls down on the report to item 8, which is the background papers, at item G, there is the list of current registered providers. So probably all the information that you were asking for might well be there. I welcome the report. I also welcome Councillor Dunning's positive comments about housing associations, because they do fulfil a very necessary role in Crawley. They do provide a lot of homes. In Broadfield we have 2 large housing association sites, the Guinness Trust and the London Quadrant. The last time I was walking around the Guinness Trust was on July the 4th this year, knocking on doors, persuading the people to come out to vote. And I have to say, from my own observation, which is probably pretty subjective, the maintenance and the appearance of the estate actually seemed to me to be very good. But I do think that while we have to recognise that these are organisations in their own right, and in actual fact, when you take into consideration all the properties that they own outside of Crawley, they are in actual fact a lot bigger than us. They also do have their own complaints procedures, and ultimately tenants can go to the housing ombudsman if they're not satisfied with the service they're getting. But that said, I dare say that an intervention from a local councillor may well be useful. I think overall, I'm glad that Councillor Lunnon thinks that we've got our cabinet response right. If we want things to progress, and I think the idea of us working together with housing associations where we can is an excellent idea. But it may not happen overnight. It may take time to get it all working, because while we may have the will, for whatever reason, the housing associations may not be quite so keen or enthusiastic to act as partners with us. So that's definitely something we're going to work on. I'll be quite happy to write to the minister concerned if that's what the cabinet want me to do, and I'll if you wish me to do that, then obviously I will show the draft of the letter to the chair of the scrutiny panel before it gets sent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I don't see any other members. Chris, yes, you can. Yeah. Microphone though.
Oh, sorry. The list that Ian referred to is not in the paperwork that we've got. So
No, I think Ian might have been referring to the original report. It hasn't made it in. It hasn't made it into the report that went to cabinet, Ian. But what we can do, I think.
It's a hyperlink within the document.
Oh, it's a hyperlink, right? What we can do anyway, I think, is that we'll get a list of registered providers in next week's members' information bulletin, so people know the list of registered providers that there are in Crawley. Just to move on then to the recommendations, but before. Oh, Councillor Lunnon.
Well, it was just on that very point. It was actually buried in page 8 of the minutes of the November meeting, which I'm sure you've all read. But to save you the effort, I have emailed you all individually the same table, so it should be in your email inbox just now. There you go. Sorry, yeah. So
it's a surprising number, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was a very surprising number, and ones you wouldn't have heard of in very small numbers. But yeah,
yes, indeed. Thank you. Just to say, I mean, clearly, I remember some of the discussions as the panel moved through its investigations, and I think what's become quite clear is that whatever scrutiny we might have in theory doesn't necessarily work in practice, and indeed fundamentally, registered providers are accountable directly to their tenants and the housing ombudsman, and that's it, and that's a bit of a shame, because clearly as councillors from time to time we do get approached by housing association tenants that we'd like to help just as much as we'd help our own council housing tenants at Crawley Homes. And I would say on this that my observation, having become more aware over the past couple of years of issues relating to the housing association stock, is that Crawley Homes, in my view, compares very favourably. I would say that, and I think not that we should ever be complacent, but it is at least of some reassurance and satisfaction to me that I can reach that judgment. So clearly, we want to look to ensure that standards are good for everyone, and so I think the work of the panel has been very important in helping us move forward with that. So I'd like to thank Councillor Lunnon, members of the panel, officers, and those who did participate in the panel's work from a wider area. It's good also to know that what we're proposing is support that's been tabled is supported by Councillor Lunnon as chair of the panel. So thank you for that. So you will know. I will move on now to sort out the formal part of this, which is you'll note the publication of the supplementary agenda and the proposed response to the final report. The Cabinet agrees with the thrust of the Scrutiny panel's recommendation. However, given the experience of the review, it is concerned whether officers would be able to secure the information and input required to successfully undertake and secure the activities as set out in recommendations A to D. So the Cabinet proposes amendments to these recommendations as highlighted in bold in the supplementary agenda. So I move that the Cabinet's recommended to request that the Cabinet Member for Housing and or Chief Executive write to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, along with relevant government departments, calling for councils to have greater powers to scrutinise registered housing providers, along with powers to direct registered housing providers to make amends where failure occurs, and that this letter also requests that registered providers provide a breakdown of their tenant satisfaction measures at a local authority level. This is likely to apply where stock is above a certain level, and that this be provided to the relevant local authorities upon request. Participate in local partnership and council activity convened by local authorities to address matters that relate directly to their stock and tenants. Include local councillors within their engagement activity with tenants, and that officers provide as much information as possible in accordance with GDPR to registered providers once a social tenancy is agreed, so that registered provider can assist the tenant fully both prior and during the placement. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Irvine. Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. We will now consider the Crawley Homes Annual Complaints Performance and Service Improvement Report and Statutory Complaints Handling Code. Councillor Irvine to present.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first time this report has been produced in this way. It's a requirement now from the Housing Ombudsman, part of our statutory, which has become a statutory, so we're now required to do it, and it is eventually to be published on the council's website. As I said the other night at the Scrutiny Commission, I actually welcome this report because it shows where we are or what we need to do to improve. And I think there is room for improvement. And it was thoroughly scrutinised by the Overview Scrutiny Commission tonight, and you'll obviously hear from Councillor Ayling in a minute. And it was also scrutinised by the Tenants and Leaseholders Action Panel. Like the Overview Scrutiny Commission, I hope we can thank them for all their hard work that they do, not just on this, but on all other matters. So, as I say, we are looking, to improve matters. And one of the things which I have to do, as now I have a title of member with responsibility for complaints, is to ensure that information is provided to Cabinet on a regular basis, so that that progress on complaints can be monitored. I was talking to to Amanda, the head of Crawley Homes, this morning. We feel that a quarterly report would be adequate, but if the Cabinet wanted a more frequent report, then that could be equally arranged. So, I may not be doing this job in a year's time, but even if I'm not, I look forward to seeing progress on our complaints handling, and and regular monitoring throughout the year. So that's it for me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. Does any member of the Cabinet... Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon. I'll bring in Councillor Ayling to present the Commission's comments. Sorry, Councillor Ayling. I'm trying to jump the gun there. Right, so.
Microphone.
Microphone, please.
We took item 5 and item 7 as kind of one, which was requested by Amanda, because she felt that they interlinked to each other. So I've only got one report for the two items. So the Commission considered report CH208 and associated appendix of the head of Crawley Homes. During the discussion with the Cabinet Member for Housing and the head of Crawley Homes and Crawley Homes Policy and Engagement Manager, the following comments were expressed. It was noted that the Housing Ombudsman's Complaints Handling Code became legal from the 1st of April this year. And it was also noted that there had been more complaints in different areas of the town. This was in the latter half of the last year, and as a result of staffing issues, together with publicity in the sector, especially around damp and mould. It was also noted that the complaints can be an opportunity to highlight factors in order to provide a good service. Action plans and complaints are looked at monthly to ensure improvement. The Tenants and the Leaseholders Action Panel was thanked for the input and feedback, particularly into the Complaints Service Improvement Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ayling. I'll open the debate for other Cabinet members. Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I welcome the report. It's really one of the area where we get as a lot of casework from residents, and something like this, with we having a regular monitoring report presented to Cabinet or to the members, I think will be very, very useful. Do we, just a quick question, I think I was reading it, couldn't find it, maybe I ignored it. Is there any SLA on those? They become now legal as a statutory requirement for the complaint process. Do we have SLA to respond to the residents, or in time? There's a time for that, or just we have to do something about it?
Yeah, Amanda or Ian? Sorry, Ian, would you?
Well,
Yeah, Ian.
Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong, but we are bound by the Housing Ombudsman's Complaints Handling Code, which does give us deadlines. You know, we have to respond within a certain number of days. So and also resolve it within 20 working days of acknowledgement. So if Amanda's got anything to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is set out in the Code of Guidance by the Housing Ombudsman. There are different timescales for responding to stage 1 and stage 2 complaints, and there are other requirements as well around how soon we are required to contact a complainant after a complaint comes in. It doesn't matter whether it's stage 1 or stage 2, that's 5 days. There are also rules around extensions and agreeing extensions as well. And all of this is reflected in our own council complaints policy as well.
Thank you. Chris Mullins.
Yeah, thank you.
Microphone, Chris.
In the old days, you know, it used to get switched on for me. I'm just not used to this modern world. But there you go. I see this very much as a working paper in many ways, because you can look at it and see what's been going on and perhaps where things need to change. I think the idea of getting a quarterly report, which would probably be smaller than this, I should think, would be very useful, and it could highlight maybe the results from Ombudsman judgments on complaints to them. That would be quite useful, because we do get a number coming through of people who are saying, look, we're going to go to the Ombudsman and we're not happy, and quite often we don't always hear the outcome of that, and so it would be good to know what the outcome is, especially if you've been dealing with the case. So, I mean, I think generally speaking, I mean, I'm proud of Crawley, and I think we do a good job, and we look after our tenants generally quite well. And I just think that that's what we should be doing. I think it's important that we do that. I would like to say, just throw it in here, is that sometimes people have said to me that they felt they're under pressure because they're in a 3-bedroom house and they're an old lady or something living alone. And sometimes council officers have been a bit crude in the way they've dealt with suggesting they might need to move or to go to smaller property. I think that's a very specialist area, and I think there's a case for it, but it needs very special and sensitive handling. And I don't think everybody that we employ has got those skills to do that, and it probably requires some training to how you would approach a tenant who'd lived in a place for 30 or 40 years with all her memories and her husband still there and the memories of her children. And we tend to forget that these are people's homes. They're homes that they came to from London probably to live here in what was seen as the countryside in those days. And they've spent many, many happy years here. And I just think that whilst we are in desperate need of to capture back council housing, or if we can, or maybe even buying it on the open market if it's available, we just need to be able to be very sensitive with people who've lived for so long in that type of property. And I worry that we're not always as sensitive as we should be. I've just had a couple of comments put to me in the past about the way they've been approached, and I'm only trying to relay that in an advisory way, not a critical way. So whilst I think there is a case for it, I think that's how we should deal with it. Other than that, I mean, I think that this is good that we're doing this, and I'd like to see the quarterly one. Perhaps it wouldn't be so long and bulky, and we could look at it more quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any... Oh, Sue. Thanks.
Sorry. Thank you. I welcome the report because I think it's very comprehensive, and I'm sure as you read through that all of us as councillors recognise some of the complaints because we get them too. They come back to us. A bit disappointed that we're not succeeding so well at stage 1, but it's good to see that we're doing much better at stage 2 and that we do get there in the end. Obviously, a lot of what you do is an extremely difficult task because you're dealing with people's perception of what's going on and not always necessarily the right story. And quite often we'll get a story from a tenant or somebody, one of our residents, and then when we delve deeper into it, we find there's a whole lot more going on than we thought, you know, than actually being reported back to us. So you do have a difficult job to do, balancing complaints about the service, also by necessarily balancing complaints about neighbours and so on like that. It's a really difficult one to deal with, I'm quite sure. As I said, there's always more to the story, as we know, but I'm sure there's more to the story for our residents too. And it's really important that we get our service right. And it's not always easy because we're dealing with contractors. Contractors don't always turn up when they say they do. We all know that because we all employ private contractors from time to time when they don't turn up, or they turn up at the wrong time, or when it's not convenient for you. So we're not perfect, but we'd like to see we're aiming to get to perfect. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. I'm not seeing anyone else. Ian, would you like to come back on points made yet? Oh, okay, sure. Microphone, please, Ian. Yeah, cheers.
Right. First of all, on Councillor Chris Mullins' comment, I mean, if any tenant ever feels that they've been not treated fairly or they've been treated a bit roughly over a matter, then, you know, as far as I'm concerned, that shouldn't happen, and I really am sorry that if anyone's ever felt like that. But you've raised it here at the highest level, and hopefully well, not hopefully, that will be noted and fed back within the organisation. Councillor Sue Mullins is absolutely right about the disappointment about the stage 1 complaints. That's already been flagged up as a priority, and as I enjoy my new title, additional title of member responsible for complaints, I'm looking forward to rapid improvement in that, to be honest with you. But as I've said before, you know, I think, you know, Crawley Homes is an organisation, and any organisation is going to get complaints, and it will be, you know, a strange organisation where there weren't any complaints. You might think that if there aren't any complaints, then there might be a culture of people being unwilling to complain, and you know that we're not that sort of organisation. We are open and we are responsive, and this report will, you know, instruct our work for the months to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I think I might have missed Councillor Noyce. Did you want? Oh, you didn't. Oh, okay. Right, fair enough. Okay. Oh, fair enough. Okay. Right. Yes. Right. In that case, don't see anyone else in that. I'd just say that clearly this report, what the work we're doing, this is all part and parcel of how we, achieve the best standards that we can. My personal view is that quarterly reports to Cabinet is adequate, because I just don't consider that any added value comes if this comes to Cabinet any more frequently, particularly if it has been regularly reviewed by the Cabinet member. So, I mean, I'm quite happy with what's been proposed, personally. So what I would suggest is I'm going to move that Cabinet support recommendations A, B and C on page 23 of the reports. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Irvine. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Right, thank you. We will now consider the 2024-25 budget monitoring Q1 report. I don't want to spend a great deal of time on this tonight because I spent quite a lot of time on OSC on Monday. I think some top lines are that 24-25 continues to be challenging for the council financially. There were a number of variations. However, I think the forecast outturn expenditure was broadly neutral for this quarter, £115,000 over budget. And although I don't think any of us are delighted by an overspend, given previous quarters and our experience of mounting costs recently above inflation costs across the sector, this is a relatively modest figure in comparison, and I think that's as a result is something that is reassuring to a certain extent, and hopefully an indication of future quarters being similarly predictable rather than unpredictable. Temporary accommodation continues to be the main area of service expenditure, over which of course the council has no direct control. I believe I'm correct in saying that the number of households now, the total number of households now in temporary accommodation are some of the highest they've ever been in the history of the borough. And so although the increase isn't steep, even if it levels out, it doesn't mean the costs of the council still aren't high. So, and I think the other thing I'd really want to mention is that through no fault of our own, in my view, the 23-24 outturn report and this quarter shows a significant spend on the old town hall site because we haven't been able to take it out of rating. That was refused by the valuation office, and that work is continuing to explore mitigations, but we did take advice on this, and we were more than surprised when the valuation office made the decision it did. So hopefully we can reach some positive conclusions with that. But saying that, if it wasn't, in my view, for what that's done and associated issues with what the valuation office has rated some of our unoccupied floors, we wouldn't be talking about an overspend now. So that's a little bit disappointing. But clearly, one thing we can be very positive about is the largest positive variation was £816,000 in our favour on interest on investments. That's partly due to larger balances being available due to slippage in the capital programme, but also interest rates have remained higher for longer, and we've locked into some longer term deals, which is a real feather in the cap for our team that deals with those investments. So I've already asked Caroline to pass our thanks on to the team, but Vicky is here, our chief accountant, so I'm sure she will pass that on as well. I think that's all I want to say at the moment. I'll leave it there. So what I'll do is I'll bring in Councillor Ayling to present the Commission's comments.
Thank you. The Commission considered the report FIN 665 of the head of Corporate Finance. During the discussion with the leader and the head of Corporate Finance, the following points were expressed. Support that the council was forecast to receive 816k of additional investment interest. Concerns were expressed for the project's overspend of 575k due to the rateable values of business rates for the new town hall and Create building, particularly in comparison to the rental income. It was disappointing to note that the 24-25 repayment of Public Works Loan Board figure had been omitted from the major repairs reserve in the financial outcome 2023 and 2024 quarter 4 report, but it was confirmed that the debt had been paid and the correct figures was provided for transparency. Recommendation that with regards to the new Burndon's funding for reimbursed the full cost of the temporary accommodation incurred for Kardashians, the council...
Chagossians, yeah.
Sorry. The council still had yet to receive payment. Clarification was provided on the future of the TA budget and the work required to meet the ongoing challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ayling. I'll now open the debate for other Cabinet members. Councillor Sue Mullins.
Just a couple of small things.
Microphone.
Yeah, just a couple of small things, well, not particularly small things, quite expensive things. One is just pointing out yet again that we are still in a very challenging situation with our looking for temporary accommodation, because we live in an extremely expensive area of the southeast. The prices are going up for rental accommodation all the time, every day in this town, and we are still stuck with the 2011 local housing allowance rates, which, you know, desperately needs something doing about, but has not been done. And of course, the other one that the OSC commented on, the fact the council has yet to receive any payment at all for our 23-24 claim from the government for new burden fundings for the Chagossians that we're doing. It's quite shocking that we have to wait for money like this. I'm quite sure if we owed the government money, they would be on top of us very quickly to say, pay your money now. But when we're waiting to get it from the government, it takes them a very long time to decide, yes, can we have it? And then, yes, give it to us. So I'd like to see the government moving a bit faster.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mullins. This is on the Chagossians, is it referring?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I'm sure. Yes, I mean, the previous government didn't put in the processes in order to pay, to make the payments to us, so that's still being worked through, so hopefully we will receive it. We've certainly submitted the claims. Right, any other comments or observations, Cabinet? No. In that case, I move that the Cabinet supports the recommendations A and B on page 75. Do I have, thank you, seconded by Councillor Nawaz. Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you, Cabinet. Right, there is no supplemental agenda. So with the business of the Cabinet of the 4th of September concluded, the meeting is now closed at 7:50. We will shortly begin the Cabinet briefing for the 2nd of October Cabinet. But if members could bear with us while the camera is and the broadcasting is dealt with. Thank you.